Welcome to the debate. Usually, when we picture a ghost town, there is this expectation of creeping nature,
Right, yeah,
like vines slowly overtaking brick walls.
exactly.
You picture wooden saloon doors rotting off their hinges, or I don't know, tumbleweeds rolling down Main Street. It's a very organic, visible, slow decay.
It has a certain romanticism to it. We kind of like things to return to the earth visibly. It just makes sense to us.
It does. But if humanity vanished tomorrow, our internet wouldn't immediately go dark. We'd leave behind this digital ghost town of humming servers, automated bots, and algorithmic loops.
Which is completely alien to our natural understanding of ruins.
Right, it's a landscape of digital ruins. So today we are debating whether that surviving infrastructure, this autonomous continuation of post-human content, holds intrinsic value as a persistent monument of human expression, or, on the flip side, whether it just immediately degrades into meaningless mechanical entropy.
Yeah.
I will be playing the role of, let's call it, the last philosopher. I'll be arguing that this autonomous digital architecture possesses profound structural value that actively defies the laws of entropy, regardless of whether we are here to see it.
And I'll be taking the stance of the last sentimentalist, I suppose. I will be arguing that without human consciousness present to interpret and guide those systems, the data rapidly devolves into meaningless noise. The physical decay is far more aggressive than we realize, and the information left behind becomes completely unmoored from reality.
Okay, so I want to start by framing what we're actually looking at when we talk about this digital ecosystem, because it is an incredible physical and structural monument. Drawing on information philosophy, there's this concept known as embodied information structures.
Okay.
We tend to think of data as this abstract, invisible cloud. But it's not. Data requires physical matter to be embodied, and it requires physical energy to be communicated.
Right, it's hardware and electricity.
Exactly. It is a real, structural rearrangement of the physical universe. So even without a human observer clicking a mouse, the sheer fact that a localized hydroelectric dam can continue to pump power into automated servers,
Yeah.
and that artificial intelligence models can continue to execute their programmed instructions, is a massive defiance of the second law of thermodynamics. I really believe expression is an act of defiance against entropy.
But is it still expression if no one is listening?
I think so. This network essentially becomes a self-sustaining digital museum of our civilization. The machines keep humming, the algorithms keep processing, and that structural persistence has inherent objective value.
Well, I look at it from a fundamentally different baseline. Information by its very nature requires a knower.
Okay?
To explain this, I look to a philosophical concept called Polanyi's paradox. It essentially states that, well, the quote is, "We can know more than we can tell."
Right. Tacit knowledge.
Exactly. Human tacit knowledge. Our intuition, our adaptability, our silent understanding of context, that is the irreplaceable hidden variable in all of these digital systems. Without human consciousness to observe and interpret the output, these ghost servers aren't generating a museum.
What are they generating then?
They're generating what we call observer-relative data. It means nothing on its own. It's just physical state changes in silicon. I mean, an open book in an empty room isn't a story, right? It's just ink on paper.
That's a poignant way to put it.
And furthermore, the physical substrate of this world is incredibly fragile. Without our tacit knowledge maintaining it, it is destined for rapid, catastrophic failure.
Okay, let's test that fragility then. Because if the active grid is just a ticking time bomb, we need to know exactly how long the clock has. How long do these machines actually survive to process anything once the human element is removed?
The answer is bracingly short. I mean, the primary dependency of any algorithmic system is electricity, and our power grids are delicate balancing acts. It's a constant game of matching power produced to power consumed, every single second, 24/7.
Right, without human grid operators managing load imbalances, the overarching grid collapses in hours?
Exactly. Hours. But I'll grant you the best case scenario. Let's say you have a localized pocket, like a massive data center, plugged directly into a highly resilient automated hydroelectric dam.
So the power keeps flowing?
The power keeps flowing. the servers will still die rapidly because they will literally cook themselves to death.
Just because of the thermal output of the processors?
Yes. Data centers require aggressive precision cooling. They use these heavy-duty industrial systems called computer room air handlers, or CRH units.
Okay.
If the chilled water stops flowing or the fans fail, the temperature rise isn't gradual. It is explosive. You have to remember, a server rack isn't just a warm box. It is densely packed with millions of microscopic transistors, firing billions of times a second.
Creating immense electrical resistance?
Exactly, resistance and friction. In a standard 150 square foot server room with a 10 kilowatt IT load rack, if the cooling fails, the ambient temperature rises by 1 to 2 degrees Fahrenheit every single minute.
Oh, wow. So you're talking about hitting critical heat in a matter of minutes.
In exactly 11 minutes, that rack hits critical thermal threshold, which is around 95 degrees Fahrenheit.
11 minutes.
Yeah, and within 23 minutes, it hits the absolute physical limit of the hardware. The solder can soften, the silicon itself begins to warp. To prevent the circuits from literally melting into slag, the hardware triggers automated hard shutdowns. It becomes a silicon sauna, and then it goes permanently dark.
It's almost like, wait, think about a nuclear plant's dead man switch.
Okay.
If something goes wrong, a nuclear reactor will automatically drop control rods to kill the reaction and prevent a meltdown. It's an automated failsafe. Isn't a server doing the exact same thing when it shuts itself down at 95 degrees?
I mean, yes, technically.
I'd argue that the very fact the server knows to shut itself off to preserve its physical hardware is proof that our systems possess a self-governing logic. They outlive our manual input by successfully executing their final preservation commands.
It's a fair comparison, but look at the outcome. The server preserves its silicon, but it ceases to function as an active network. But let's look at a system that doesn't shut down, something outside our atmosphere, satellites in geostationary orbit.
Ah, okay.
They don't have thermal runaway issues in the same way. And they aren't relying on a fragile terrestrial power grid. They have solar panels and they sit in the vacuum of space. Yes, they will physically persist for millennia without atmospheric drag pulling them down.
Right.
But their data, their actual function, degrades almost immediately because of the physics of space-time.
You're talking about the global positioning system, right? The relativity problem.
Precisely. The GPS network is essentially a giant clock floating in space, and it is a practical, daily application of Einstein's theories of relativity. It is kind of mind-bending when you really think about it.
Yeah, because velocity slows down time. Exactly. Because a GPS satellite is moving incredibly fast, about 14,000 kilometers per hour. Special relativity dictates that its onboard atomic clock ticks slower than a clock here on Earth by about 7 microseconds a day.
But then there's the gravity aspect.
Right. At the same time, because the satellite is 20,000 kilometers away from the center of the Earth, it experiences significantly less gravity than we do on the surface.
General relativity dictates that weaker gravity makes time move faster. So its clock ticks faster by about 45 microseconds a day.
Which leaves us with a mathematical discrepancy, a net gain of 38 microseconds per day.
Right. Now, 38 microseconds sounds utterly trivial.
It really does.
But GPS works by measuring the exact time it takes for a light speed signal to reach your phone. Light travels about 0.3 meters in a single nanosecond. If you are off by 38 microseconds, the system calculates your position incorrectly by over 10 kilometers.
Wow, 10 kilometers a day?
Yeah. Without daily human correction from ground stations to synchronize those atomic clocks back to Earth time, that error compounds every single day. Within weeks, the entire global navigation system is completely unmoored from physical reality. The satellite is physically there, humming away, but the data is meaningless noise.
I want to pause on that, because the decoupling of the GPS data from terrestrial accuracy doesn't, to me, negate the structural beauty of the system itself.
How so?
Yes, it stops being useful to a human trying to find a coffee shop. But the mathematical drift is completely predictable. It's an autonomous physical process playing out exactly as the laws of physics dictate.
It's a monument to the fact that we built a machine so precise it literally had to account for the warping of space-time to function.
I'll give you that it's a monument, but
But let's concede that the active networks, the spinning servers, and the synchronized satellites will eventually fragment, drift, and shut down. What about the static data left behind?
you mean the offline storage?
Right. If a data center safely shuts down before it melts, does the physical storage media effectively preserve the human legacy? I argue that it does. We have immense archives of cold storage.
You mean the physical hard drives just sitting idle on racks?
Exactly. Hard disk drives can retain their magnetic polarity, the literal zeros and ones encoded on their platters for 10 to 30 years without power.
Sure, in ideal conditions.
And magnetic tape, which is heavily used by massive institutions for cold storage archiving, is rated to last 30 years. Plus, we have advanced media like M-disks, which literally engrave data into rock-like metals, theoretically preserving it for centuries. The physical persistence of these offline digital ghost towns means the information remains structurally intact, acting as a fossil record of humanity.
But a fossil record requires a stable geological environment. You are treating this storage media as if it exists in a perfect vacuum.
Well, a data center is pretty stable.
Not when the power goes out. Without human-maintained climate control, the ambient temperature and humidity of the Earth absolutely destroy physical media.
But wait, a solid-state drive, for instance, doesn't have moving parts. It's basically a solid block of memory. Why would that fail just because the AC is off?
Because at the microscopic level, it's not actually a solid block of matter. It's relying on trapped energy. Solid-state drives, or SSDs, store your data by trapping electrons inside microscopic cages called NAND flash cells.
Right, okay.
They use an insulating layer to keep those electrons trapped, but the insulation isn't perfect. Over time, due to quantum tunneling and ambient temperature fluctuations, those electrons literally leak out of the cages.
Just evaporate?
Yeah, because there is no active power source to refresh the charge and keep the gate shut, the data evaporates. Within years, a perfectly intact-looking SSD is completely blank.
Okay, but magnetic tape doesn't rely on trapped electrons. It relies on magnetic polarity. It doesn't suffer from electrical charge leakage.
No, it suffers from basic chemistry. Magnetic tape is highly susceptible to a process called binder hydrolysis.
Binder hydrolysis.
Yeah. Think of the tape as a plastic ribbon, and the magnetic particles holding the data are glued to that ribbon with a chemical binder resin.
Okay, the glue.
Right. When the air conditioning fails, humidity creeps into the data center. The water molecules in the unconditioned air are absorbed by that binder resin. The water literally reacts with the polymer chains of the glue, snipping them apart.
Oh, man.
Sticky, gummy, unreadable residue. The layers of the tape on the spool literally glue themselves together. The data melts. We aren't leaving behind stone pyramids. We are leaving behind highly volatile chemical composites that rot into syrup.
The chemistry is undeniable, I'll give you that. But it assumes a uniform failure rate across all environments, which isn't the case. We have data centers in subarctic climates, facilities buried deep underground in places like Svalbard or northern Scandinavia, where the natural ambient freezing temperatures natively preserve magnetic and optical media for much longer periods. The decay is slowed to a crawl.
Fair point.
But let's pivot from the offline storage, the frozen archives, and look at the remnants of the active web. Let's imagine those localized networks that do survive on automated renewable energy.
Okay, the pockets of power.
Right, we are looking at a fascinating software layer that stays awake. The automated bots, the web crawlers, the generative AI models left running in closed loops. I suggest that these automated agents, actively generating post-human content, constitute an evolving, dynamic ecology.
You actually see a closed loop of algorithms as an ecology?
I do. Even if it is just machines talking to machines. It's this sort of in-view reality. You have algorithms trying to recommend content to an audience of zero.
That sounds incredibly bleak.
Maybe, but you also have web crawlers meticulously cataloging the internet, hitting 404 not found errors as others' servers drop off, and logging those dead links. You have large language models churning out text based on the prompts of other bots. It is a continuation of our design. It's an active, ongoing expression of the systems we built,
adapting to a suddenly empty environment.
I have to push back strongly there because it is not an adaptation and it is certainly not an evolution. It is digital inbreeding that aggressively erases the complexity of human culture.
Digital inbreeding?
Yes, what you are describing, bots feeding on bots, leads directly to a mathematically proven phenomenon known as AI model collapse.
So wait, I want to clarify this for myself. If an AI bot reads text generated by another AI bot, why doesn't it just stay exactly the same? It's software. It's just copying text. Why does it actively degrade into gibberish?
Because generative AI models aren't copy machines, they are fundamentally probability engines. They work by predicting the next most likely word in a sequence based on a statistical bell curve.
Right.
When they are recursively trained on synthetic data, meaning they ingest output generated by other bots, they suffer from an entropy spiral. They inherently oversample the high probability features in the middle of the bell curve, and they ignore the low probability features at the edges.
The extremes of the data distribution.
Exactly. We call it the long tail. The long tail is where all the complex, specialized human knowledge lives. Rare medical diagnoses, highly nuanced cultural idioms, specialized scientific jargon, poetry. All of that sits in the margins.
And the bots just ignore it.
Yes. As the models feed on their own output, they lose that variance. The bell curve gets narrower and taller. The output converges into a highly biased, repetitive mean. Early collapse starts with the total loss of rare human knowledge. Late collapse results in extreme homogeneity.
Wow.
Eventually, it collapses into nonsensical gibberish, just repeating the same high-probability words over and over. The. It is semantic drift. It's the dead internet theory taken to its ultimate literal extreme. A network populated entirely by ghosts, losing fidelity with every cycle until it is just random noise.
But isn't there something profoundly authentic about that decay?
Authentic? How?
Let's use a physical analogy. If you take a beautifully detailed document and you photocopy it, and then you photocopy the photocopy, and you do that 10,000 times,
Right.
eventually you are left with a solid gray blur. Isn't that final gray blur still a perfect, honest reflection of the machine's inherent mechanical process? Even if the original meaning of the text is lost, doesn't that algorithmic decay serve as its own authentic artifact?
I don't follow.
It's an echo of sincerity. It shows exactly how the machine processes information when it is completely stripped of human intervention and human bias.
A blur is just a blur. There's no sincerity in a machine devoid of experience. This brings us right back to the philosophical grounding I mentioned earlier. There's a framework called Integrated Information Theory, or IIT.
Could you define that briefly for us? How does IIT view this?
Broadly speaking, Integrated Information Theory attempts to measure consciousness by looking at how a system integrates information. It argues that consciousness isn't just about processing data. It's about how interconnected and causally reliant that data is within a unified system.
Okay.
For information to be meaningful, the system must have an internal perspective. It requires connection. What is the value of an echo if there are no ears to hear it? You call it an echo of sincerity, but it's really just the rapid degradation of meaning.
Because there's no feedback.
Precisely. Without the human tacit knowledge to guide the models, specifically without RLHF, or reinforcement learning from human feedback, where actual humans continuously curate the output and tell the machine this is valuable and this is gibberish, the system has no grounding in reality. It's just dominoes falling over.
I completely understand the reliance on human feedback for utility. You say algorithms only possess explicit knowledge and lack our tacit understanding, our intuition. I don't disagree with the premise.
Right.
But I disagree with the conclusion that it makes the surviving system worthless. The algorithms are executing exactly what we explicitly told them to do. They are carrying forward our mathematical will.
Even if it's gibberish?
Yes. The fact that a web crawler can meticulously log a 404 not found error when a domain expires and file it away in a database that no one will ever read is an incredible testament to human ingenuity. It is a monument to our desire to organize the universe.
But a monument to what, ultimately? To our absence? Picture those web crawlers. They're building a perpetual, endless backlog of dead links. They're effectively wandering through this ghost town of social media looking for a single human heartbeat, a single like or connection, and finding nothing.
That is a very sentimental way to view a script.
It's the reality of what it was built for. And because they lack that tacit knowledge, they don't even know they are in a ghost town. They just keep executing code until the charge leaks from the microscopic NAND cages, where the binder hydrolysis claims the magnetic tape. It is a mechanical tragedy. It isn't a monument. It's an engine winding down.
That is a haunting image. But the tragedy only exists if you demand that the system serves a human utility. If you remove the demand that the internet must be useful to a human consumer, you are left with pure structure. And structure, complex, ordered matter and energy defying the chaos of the universe, has value entirely on its own.
I simply cannot separate utility and meaning from the structure. Without the special kind of energy that is human creativity, without a mind to observe it, the digital world rapidly succumbs to the physics and chemistry of the natural world.
Yeah?
It perishes, leaving behind only the melted silicon and the gummy tape that originally embodied it. It eventually joins the geological and ecological cycles of a planet that has simply moved on without us.
We have been talking about this giant, abandoned machine, and it feels like we have found a fascinating point of convergence. We both agree that the digital world, for all its abstract cloud metaphors, is inextricably tethered to the physical world.
Absolutely. We like to think of the internet as an ethereal space, but the cloud is just someone else's computer.
Right.
And a computer is just refined rocks, precious metals, and electricity. It is bound by thermodynamics, by the chemistry of adhesives, and remarkably, even by the relativistic warping of space-time. Where we fundamentally diverge is on the philosophical weight of what remains. Does unobserved information retain intrinsic value once the observers are completely gone?
Exactly. It's a question of whether our creations hold weight in the universe independent of our gaze. The intricate, deeply fragile bond between humanity and our technology is profound. There is clearly much more to explore in the intersection of digital ecology, physics, and information theory.
And perhaps, if nothing else, exploring this ghost town reminds us to value the human element right now, the tacit knowledge, the intuition, the very real human connection that gives all this immense technology its actual meaning while we are still here to use it.
Indeed. We will leave it to you, our listeners, to form your own conclusions. Think back to that digital ghost town we started with. The screens are completely dark, the automated servers are humming in the cold, and the algorithms are whispering to each other in an endless, closed loop.
It really feels like a campfire story at the end of the world.
It does. And it leaves us with one final thought. If the machines keep recording for the sake of the silence itself, are we still listening?